Hey guys! Today we're doing a camera comparison between the base models of the new Galaxy S24, the S23, and I'm including the S21. I'm including the S21 because I think it'll really highlight some of the changes Samsung has been making to the camera's image processing over the years. I have my phone set up, it's a beautiful day out, let's get to shooting. And we're starting off with the main camera. With this set of photos, you can really see the S21's warmer tones. And there is slight more saturation in the colors, especially the bike frame and the mural in the back. And of course, the S23 and 24 had a more natural tone, but the S23 exposed the mural in the back much better. In this set, you can really see the unnatural saturation in the S21. And the S23 is showing a little bit too white, while the S24 has an overall more balanced color. In this close-up shot, all look pretty consistent at first glance. However, the S21 is a lot brighter, but the sunlight hitting the leaves and berries are a little bit overexposed. The S23 is about the same, but not much better. And the S24, while a bit darker, is overall much better exposed. My pick here is the S24. In this set, each one was way different. You can particularly see it in the parking lot's blacktop, where we have different shades of gray in each. And the S24 has a strange tone compared to the others. The sky turned gray and the overall photo has a yellow tone. The S21 is a bit brighter and looks nicer overall. But the whites are a little bit too white. And the S23 looks the most natural with a blue sky still and an actual gray black top. In this set, everything looks pretty consistent across the board. However, the greener grass on the S21 is definitely more noticeable. If we punch in a bit here, we can definitely see more differences in the skin tone, especially the face. The S23 is giving me a little bit of a white face. The S21 has a bit more contrast, especially on the blacks. And the S24 looks overall more balanced. Switching to portrait mode, all did exceptionally well with the background separation. But the background bokeh is quite different in each, with the S24 looking the most buttery. In a portrait shot later in the evening, the S23 did better here with the background bokeh and brightening up my face, which I think is ideal for a portrait shot. Now moving on to some night shots. I have to say, all of them look pretty damn good. The obvious difference here is the lens flare on the lampposts in the S21, while the S23 and 24 handled the light perfectly. The S21 is a little bit warmer and darker. And the S24 is giving us a little bit better exposure where we can see more of the edges of the leaves on the branches. So in this set, the S21 looks the best to me because it has the least amount of noise. However, I have to note that it took me a long time to get this shot on the S21 because it had a lot of trouble focusing in the dark. Whereas for the S23 and 24, it was pretty much focusing instantly. Punching in a bit, we can see that the S21 still has a great amount of sharpness. This is most likely because of the S21's 64 megapixel camera versus the S23 and 24's 50 megapixels. And lastly, here's a shot on Samsung's dedicated night mode. The S21 is looking heavily saturated with a crazy amount of yellow. The S23 and 24 are more balanced, but the S24 looks a lot cleaner with less noise. Before moving on from the main camera, here's a comparison between the high megapixel photos. The S21 having a 64 megapixel and the S23 and 24 with the 50 megapixel. It's hard to see any differences here, so let's punch in a bit. Now we can really see that the S23 and 24 still have a great amount of detail, but the S23 has a bit of sharpening applied. The S24 looks the cleanest here. And here's a shot at night. I would say here the S21 looks the cleanest with the least amount of noise, but let's punch in and see. And that doesn't hold true. The S24 is the least noisy with a lot of detail still, and the S23 is good as well, but there is a bit of a yellow tone. Moving on to ultrawide. In this first shot at the coffee shop, all three cameras perform decently similar. If I really wanted to be picky about it, I would say the S21 has a bit of a flatter color profile, which is odd because the main camera was very saturated in all its photos. In this shot, we can see that the S21 brings back up the saturation again, and the S23 and 24 are noticeably softer. Punching in a bit, we can see that the S24 has a lot of sharpening being applied, and the S23 looks the best to me. It's soft, but still has a great amount of detail. In this ultra-wide night shot, the S24 is the clear winner. If you look at the triangles on the ground, you can clearly see that the S21 and 23 had a lot of trouble getting a sharp focus. Using the night shot mode, we can clearly see a big difference in each of the cameras. The S21 is giving some weird yellow and green hues. The S23 is just making everything orange. The S24 looks the best here, with the ground looking natural and doesn't look like there's a color filter applied. Okay, now let's get into some zoom action. All three cameras here have a 3x optical zoom. All three had a sharp shot, and the S21 being a little punchy of course. Moving to 10x digital zoom, all three look pretty great here too. And at 20x, we're finally seeing some bigger differences, with the S23 and 24 showing a lot more detail in the mountains. And at the maxed out 30x zoom, we can clearly see that the S24 is still showing the greatest amount of detail, and the S23 is not too far behind. And the S21 just completely loses the detail and looks like a different photo. Let's look at one more zoom shot, starting at 10x. The S21 isn't looking so great here, being over-sharpened and overexposed. The S23 is looking a little bit better, but still has a fair bit of sharpening. And the S24 looking the best with little sharpening and better white balance. Going in at 20x, we see more of the same, but the S21 is just losing it. The S23 and 24 look on par with each other, but the S24 still looks better with the least amount of sharpening. And at 30x, the S24 still looks the best. The S21 is just blurrier, but I will have to say that at 30x, that's still a pretty respectable shot. And to round off zoom, we're just going to look at one night shot at the 3x optical. The S23 and 24 are looking sharp, but the S23 has a lot more noise in the sky compared to the S24. And the S21 looks like a bit of a blur. And if we punch in a bit, we can see that it's because the S21 has lost a lot of detail. Both the S23 and 24 did great here, but I'm gonna give it to the S24 for being the least noisy. Okay, now time for some video. Everything was shot in 4K 60 FPS unless otherwise noted. In this first one, I'm walking down the street with no stabilization turned on. I can see that the S21 is struggling a little bit with these small bumps. The S23 and 24 are both looking very smooth, but I think the S24 has the slight edge. Okay, now with stabilization turned on as I'm walking down the sidewalk. The S21 is still looking a bit shaky, and the S23 and 24 are looking way smoother. And with the S24 just looking a little bit brighter. Okay, now for a running test. Let's see how they do. The S21 is having a hard time smoothing out the bumps, and the S23 and 24 are handling it like a champ. And now here's a night walking shot, unstabilized. Both the S23 and 24 are doing very well here. They have a fair bit of noise, but they're doing much better than the S21, which is super grainy and blurry. For this next one, we're just gonna focus on each camera's audio. Okay, let's get into some slow-mo. Each of these was shot at 1080p 240 frames per second. And all three did exceptionally well, but if you look closely, the S24 just does it a tad better. And also to note that the S24 is capable of shooting at 4K 120 FPS, whereas the S21 and 23 can only shoot at 1080p. And we're going to round off the comparison with a look at the front camera. All cameras have an f2.2 lens, but the S21 has a 10 megapixel and the S23 and 24 with a 12 megapixel. In this selfie shot, the only difference I see is in the S21's background being a little overexposed compared to the S23 and 24. In this portrait mode shot, all did great with the background separation. The S21 is looking a little saturated though. And the S24 is looking a little flat in colors, but it is the most natural. And at night, the S23 and 24 were able to get a very clear shot, while the S21 struggled getting enough light. The S23 is the winner here with the least amount of color issues. Hey guys, we're testing the front camera right now, and it's just after sunset, so it's a little bit dark. And I can see that the S21 is brightening up my face a little bit more. Not so much on the S23 and S24. They look about the same and they're a little bit dark. So to wrap this comparison, I'll summarize my findings. On the S21, the image processing is more concentrated on color saturation and contrast, giving more punchy photos. It's also slower to focus on subjects at night, but was less noisy. And it had trouble keeping video smooth with stabilization off and on. On the S23, there is way less saturation, but there is a fair bit of artificial sharpening, plus some issues with the white balance. It's fast to focus at night, but a bit noisy. On the S24, everything was toned down a bit. Colors were more natural, and sharpening was softer. The focusing is super fast both day and night, and stabilization and slow-mo are vastly superior. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe to see more. See you in the next one.